Hello, boys and girls. Okay, it's Monday, so that means today we get to listen to an interesting story together, all right? And today we're going to read a fiction story, but it's a really cool fiction story because it also teaches us about something. Do you know what it teaches us about? Is the life cycle of a pumpkin. And in October, a lot of us see pumpkins. We might have some pumpkins in our garden, or we might have some pumpkins by our front door, or we might even do some fun activities with pumpkins. So we're going to read a story called Pumpkin Jack. Look at this pumpkin on the front cover. Hey, look at the illustration of it. Do you notice that it looks a little soggy and a little wilted? As you listen to this story, you'll find out what's going on and why the pumpkin on the front cover looks like that. So as you listen to the story, pay attention to how the pumpkin changes. Notice how it starts. Notice what happens to it as the story goes on, and use the illustrations to help you, okay? When you're done in your, on a piece of paper, you could even draw some of how the pumpkin's life cycle. So maybe you'll draw what it looks like when it's starting to grow, or maybe you'll draw some other steps in the pumpkin's life cycle. Okay, so I'm gonna read this to you, and I'll start it on Zoom, of course, as you know, but we won't have time to read the whole thing on Zoom, so we'll read it all now. Use the illustrations to help you learn about how a pumpkin grows and changes. This is called Pumpkin Jack, and it's written and illustrated by Will Hubble. That means the same person drew the pictures as wrote the words. And that's what we do when we're authors. Oh, look at this pumpkin in the windowsill. Interesting. Let's see what happens to Pumpkin Jack in this story. When Tim carved his first pumpkin, it was fierce and funny and just perfect. Did you hear the word fierce? We learned that vocabulary word last week, fierce. So if it was fierce, make a fierce face. Or funny, make a funny face. And just perfect. A jack-o'-lantern this good deserved a name. So Tim gave it one, Jack. Here you can see the pieces as Tim worked on carving his pumpkin, and he named it Jack. That's the title of the book too. Interesting. Long after the best trick-or-treat candy was eaten, Tim still kept Jack. Oh, so his candy and trick-or-treating time are done, but he's keeping Jack. Look at where he's keeping him. I see a bed. Oh, I see a nightstand. He must be keeping him in his room. And look, it's almost like a nightlight, how it's lit up on his wall. How cool. At night, when a candle made Jack's face dance on the wall and filled the dark with warm pumpkin smells, Tim felt Jack was almost magic. Yet, too soon, the spell was broken. Boys and girls, remember I told you to pay attention to what happens to the pumpkin throughout the story. Let's notice, use the pictures to help you. This pumpkin is beginning to rot, announced Mom. It's time to throw him out. Tim knew it was useless to argue. He carried Jack to the garden, which was filled with the brown ghosts of last summer's plants. A dead garden is better than a trash can, he thought. Still, it made him sad to leave Jack outside alone. Hey, boys and girls, here you can see the illustration that shows Tim putting Pumpkin Jack in the garden. I see some leaves there. I see all of the dried up things from the garden. I always pay attention to characters' feelings, and I can tell he's feeling a little sad about having to put his pumpkin out there. It's rotting. Now let's look carefully at the pumpkin. Whenever chores or play brought Tim to the garden, he looked at Jack. Every time, Jack was different. He became wrinkled, and his fierce smile began to look silly. Boys and girls, notice what is happening to Jack. If someone is listening to you, you're listening to this with you, tell them. So his fierce smile is beginning to look silly. Do you see, as the reader, I'm looking at the illustrations, do you see he's kind of looking like he's like getting a little bit soft and squishy? It's not as firm as it used to be. Watch what happens now. The illustrations will help you see the pumpkin's life cycle. Look what's happening to Pumpkin Jack. Mold spread over Jack's bright orange skin. As the days turned colder, Jack grew flatter. Oh, wow. Look, he is getting flat, and I do see the mold. He's looking even more squished down, isn't he? Now look at this, boys and girls. Can you find Pumpkin Jack in the illustration? Winter began. Soon, Jack was hidden beneath snow, and Tim forgot all about him. The cold, heavy jacket days came. Snowman and sliding days. Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Valentine's. When all of these days had passed and the March winds melted the snow, Tim found Jack. So boys and girls, when he put Jack in the garden, it was fall. It was about the same time as it is right now. Look at what was happening to Jack and remind yourself. And it got colder and winter came. It says that when spring came and when March came, Tim found Jack. I bet you're wondering what Jack looks like. Make a picture of what you think Jack might look like. And now let's use the illustrations to see. Whoa, look at what Jack looks like. Do you see the seeds that were inside of him? Do you see the stem? Wow, it's really hard to tell that he was a pumpkin, huh? There wasn't much left, just a faded and crumpled pumpkin skin, a stem, and a few seeds. Jack's Halloween magic was a distant memory now. Tim scraped a thin blanket of dirt over the last bits of his pumpkin. Goodbye, Jack, he whispered. Visualize that. Says he just scraped a thin blanket of earth or soil on top of him. So in your mind, imagine now Jack covered in soil and dirt and leaves. When spring turned barefoot warm, a tiny sprout appeared where Jack had been. Tim found it and guessed what it was. Boys and girls, look at this. Look at what happened to Jack. There's a sprout. It says, look at how excited Tim is. Here in the illustration, you can see a big example of what that sprout looks like. I bet you know what's happening. Tell somebody if you do. In the days that followed, Tim weeded and watered and watched the sprout. Slowly and steadily, the plant changed and grew. It branched and spread a web of vines over the ground. But no pumpkin appeared. Boys and girls, look at this. I'm going to put this really close so you can see. You see Tim watering? And look at it. It says that vines spread over the ground. Look at the big leaves. Look at these vines here. No pumpkin yet. Today we're learning about the life cycle of a pumpkin. So first, remember we saw that sprout? And now look, you see vines and leaves. Do you see a pumpkin yet? No, no pumpkin yet. The days turned hot. Flowers opened on the plant each morning. Yellow stars that twisted and shut forever in the afternoon. But still, there were no pumpkins. Boys and girls, do that with your hands. Look at this yellow flower that's opened in the morning. Do that. It's open in the morning, and then it says it shuts in the afternoon. Some of you might have a garden with pumpkins. If you do, notice the yellow flower. We see first the sprout, Then we see the leaves and the vines. And now what do we see? See it. Oh, these yellow flowers that open in the morning and shut in the afternoon. Some of you might see that at home, or if you go to a pumpkin patch, maybe you could find some of these different stages of the pumpkin's life cycle. Finally, Tim found a little green ball growing behind a crumpled blossom. A pumpkin! Tim let out a whoop and ran to show his mom. I know he must be excited. Boys and girls, find a green ball growing behind a crumpled blossom. Oh my goodness, I see one right here. So here's the next stage in the pumpkin's life cycle. We had the sprout, we had the leaves and the vine, we had the flowers, and now look, here's a pumpkin. What color is it? It's a green pumpkin. Interesting. He carefully waded among the leaves, searching for green pumpkins like hidden treasures. If you go to a pumpkin patch, maybe you can search. Can you find another green pumpkin in the illustrations? Are you pointing right here? I see it too. There's another green pumpkin. That's the next step in a pumpkin's life cycle. School began again, and the days cooled. Tim had less time to visit the garden. When he did, the pumpkin plant seemed tired. You might notice right now some pumpkin plants looking tired. There were few new leaves, and the old tattered ones no longer hid the green fat pumpkins. Then one morning, Tim woke to see frost coating the garden. The frozen plants seemed changed to pale blue glass. Look at the frost. Sometimes right now you might wake up and see frost on some plants outside. Look at the pumpkin. After school, Tim discovered what the frost had done. The pumpkin's plant leaves were as limp as wet paper. So it's limp. The leaves are limp. It was dying. Tim searched among the withered leaves for the unripe pumpkins. He picked them and put them on the front porch, hoping for one more change. So boys and girls, that frost made the leaves die. So he's going to go pick them and put them. Do you notice that some of them are still green? Some of them have some orange, but they're not all the way orange yet, are they? He's picking them and setting them on the step. Sometimes you might go to a pumpkin patch and see some pumpkins that have been picked and set to the side so that they can finish getting ripe and ready. By Halloween, the pumpkins had ripened to a bright orange. Notice the colors. First, they were all green, weren't they? Then they were speckled with some green and some orange, and then look at them now. Notice in the illustrations that bright orange color. Cool. By Halloween, the pumpkins had ripened to bright orange. There were many, for the plant had been generous. Tim was generous too. He gave away all but one. Oh, how nice to share his pumpkins that he grew. Look at his friends' faces. I can tell how they feel. They look happy, don't they? Excited. And you know what? When you share things with others, it makes you feel good inside too. Look at his face. I can tell Tim is happy to share. But he saved one. Who do you think he saved? I wonder what pumpkin it might be. Do you have an idea? From jack-o'-lantern to seed, back to pumpkin again. The circle was almost complete. Now it was time for Tim to do his part. He gave his pumpkin a face. It smiled at him in a fierce and funny way. Tim smiled too and said, "Welcome home, Jack." He saved his Jack and he got his fierce, funny, perfect face back. That is so cool. It started that whole cycle, brought Jack back. Boys and girls, I asked you to pay attention to the changes of the pumpkin. All right, when Jack started, When Pumpkin Jack started, he was a jack-o'-lantern, huh? And then remember what happened to him? Look at the illustrations to remind yourself. He got kind of squishy and he got saggy and he was starting to rot. Then what happened? He got even flatter, didn't he? And he got mold all over him. He was covered in snow, and then Jack covered him in dirt. Do you remember that? Something sprouted. Do you remember? And then we had some vines and some leaves. And then what? Say it. What do we see next? A yellow flower. And then what color of pumpkin? Did you say green? There was a green pumpkin. And then the pumpkins got some color, some orange, but still a little green, huh? When they were all the way ripe, they were that bright orange color. Boys and girls, this book taught us a little bit about the life cycle of a pumpkin and how a pumpkin grows and changes. Think back now to the pictures and the illustrations, and will you draw some pictures to show the life cycle of a pumpkin? You can draw the pieces that you remember. Maybe you want to draw how Pumpkin Jack started. Maybe you want to draw what happened to him when he went into the garden and started to rot. Maybe you want to draw what happened in the spring when something sprouted up. And then what we saw. Maybe you want to draw the color of the flowers or the pumpkin's colors when he grew and grew. Can't wait to see some of what you remember about the pumpkin's life cycle. Okay, see ya.